Good morning, family. Good morning. Yes, God is truly awesome. It's one of those words, like when I first became a disciple, people would say, everything was awesome. My peanut butter and jelly sandwich is awesome, and this was awesome. Like, no, that word is reserved for God, just for me, so he truly is awesome. My name is Cleveland Wills. I'm from the Greater Baltimore Church. It is so good to be here yet again with my family here in Delaware. I'm not a leader. I'm none of those things. I'm just a brother. I'm a self-confessed knucklehead, but just someone who loves God and loves his family. I am blessed beyond measure to be married to the incredible, my princess Shannon Wills. In August, it'll be 26 years that we've been together. Keep praying for her. Those drugs I have to use to keep her from coming to her senses are still working. And I want to thank Brian and Lisa and the leadership group for allowing me to be here as well. I hope I don't put you to sleep. I did this sermon on Mother's Day a couple weeks back, and I definitely want to wish all the moms and all the mom figures a happy belated Mother's Day. You guys are amazing. I don't know if you guys remember this joke that this guy did a couple years back, and he was talking about how Father's Day isn't really valued. He said the number one celebrated holiday is Christmas. He said number 2 is Mother's Day. He said Father's Day is number 20. He said I didn't even know there were 18 other holidays. He said number 6 is Halloween. So if you think about it, it's Jesus, your mama, ghosts and goblins, and then down the line is fathers. So Father's Day is coming up pretty soon. I hope you guys honor your fathers. And I just want to say to the moms, please, please continue doing what you're doing. You guys are incredibly needed and special. I remember years ago, I grew up in West Baltimore City. They even named some of the streets I grew up on the show The Wire. I'm like, hey, I lived there. Oh, I know that street. I know that guy. And I remember my mom raised 3 boys as a single mom, right? And in my neighborhood, we had really, really tough times. You know, I know I'm not the only one, but we had some really tough times. And I remember this one time when I was about 12, 13, one of the guys in my neighborhood, one of the drug dealers came up to me. I'm dribbling the basketball, going to the basketball court, and he said, Lil Cleve, let me talk to you. Hey, what's up, man? He said, hey, why don't you come sell drugs for me? And in my brain, I immediately thought, oh, shucks, I'm going to get money. I'm going to get back in the 80s, the drug dealers drove these little scooters. I can get a scooter. I'll get the girls. I'll get the clothes. I'll get the shoes. I can get money to my mom. And then I thought about my mom. The fact that she was working 2 jobs to feed us little greedy children. And I thought about what would happen to her if she found out. Or if she had to bail me out of jail. Or if she had to bury me. All that quick as I'm looking at this guy. And I said, nah, man, I'm good. That's knucklehead. So moms, please continue doing what you're doing. Eventually, it works. But it's an absolute honor to get a chance to preach this morning. In Baltimore, we've been focusing on rebuilding, and we're in the book of Esther. I was given the second part of an assignment that Scott Davis started, so go on the website and you'll see the first part. I'm picking up on the second part. Esther is a very inspiring and underrated book. I'm going to be preaching from chapter 2:19 through chapter 4. The title of my sermon is Esther, the Pathway to Providence. Now, there's a lot of text, okay? And I don't want you guys to get too sick of hearing my voice very early on, so I cheated. I asked some very cool and wonderful people to help read the text for me. So I'm going to ask Anshel, Luke, Eli, and Baltimore's own Mama Leanne to come up and help me read this text.
was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he would bring her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Brianna and Heston, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of announcements in the presence of the king. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman's son of Hamediah the Agate, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gates kneeled down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded them this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it, to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw Mordecai would not kneel down and pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learning who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month of Nisan, the pur was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Azar.
Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's law. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royalty treasure." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hamad, Hamadatha the Agagite. Agagite? I don't know. The enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various people. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by the couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young, old, women, and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The couriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered.
When, when Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published by Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go to the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said.
Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent, you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions.
Yeah, clap it up for him. It's not easy doing this, getting up here. Thank you all so much. And before I get started, I want to welcome the Rays. That's an incredible story, man. Welcome to the family. When you come in Baltimore, let us know. Come on down. All right, let's dig in. There's a lot in this book, and I don't have the time to get into everything that it touches. But I implore you guys, go back and read it. Do some background information, because this is a very incredible book. As we continue with our theme of rebuilding, we have to rebuild our faith in the providence of God. There's so many definitions out there for providence, but I'm going to use one of the more simple ones: divine guidance or care. First off, let's establish something. Who is the main character of this story? Well, we have Esther, who was a young Jewish woman who was an orphan, who actually she became queen. We have Mordecai, who was a Jewish man and the cousin of Esther, who adopted her after her parents died. We have Xerxes, who was the king of Persia, and we have Haman, who we'll talk about later. They're all characters in this story, but each of them is a supporting character. God is the main character of this story. God is the main character of every story in the Bible. God wants to be the main character in your lives and in my life. The question we have to ask ourselves is, will we allow him to be? Or do we have to have top billing? That was free. You don't have to pay for that. I'm just playing. I have 3 points this morning. Where's my credit? Who or what's your Haman? And coincidence or providence? Point number 1, where's my credit? Some Jewish people had decided to stay in Persia even after King Cyrus said it was okay for the Jews to go back to their land to rebuild the temple of God. Why did they stay? I don't know. You know, the moving prices might have been too much for the moving companies. I don't know. They had a good thing going, but they decided to stay. And Esther 2, verse 19 says that Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. The King's Gate was almost like a welcome center into where the king was. Biblical scholars agree that Mordecai was not just hanging out at the gate to the royal palace, but that the text indicates he had an official position there. Exactly what the position was is never stated. He could have been working as one of the armed guards, as one of the court officials who controlled access to the palace, or perhaps even as a judge who listened to the various grievances brought by the people. It was somewhere here that Mordecai overheard the plot by Bigthana and Teresh to assassinate the king. The text does not say how Mordecai became aware of the plot or even why they wanted to take the king out. Some scholars believe that these guys wanted to take the king out because he had possibly taken their daughters to be a part of their harem. Chapter, you see that if you think about it, this king is pretty much sex trafficking. And possibly with these two men, a revenge plot was created. Now, it's not right. It's not right. But I get it. I don't have biological daughters. But I have some spiritual daughters, and I'll confess, I've threatened a boy or two. I don't try to act more spiritual than I am. Just a very humble, righteous man. I've threatened a boy or two. And this guy, this king, is rounding up virgins for his pleasure. They could have been this guy's daughters, family members. Murder is never right. Never. But if this is true, I get it. Anyway, some kind of way Mordecai finds out, and he tells Queen Esther. The queen goes to the king and tells him of the plot, giving credit to Mordecai. Verse 23 in chapter 2 says, and when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. So all shucks now. Mordecai saved the king's life. Esther made sure the king knew that it was Mordecai who revealed the plot by giving him the credit. Surely Mordecai is going to get some praise, a raise, a banquet, silver or gold or something, right? A little something, something. The next verse, chapter 3, verse 1. After these events, King Xerxes honored Mordecai. King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. I'm going to be honest, if I was Mordecai, I'd be ticked. I'd be ticked off. I saved your life, your highness. Where was the recognition? Where was the honor? Or at the very least, a thank you. Have you ever felt that? Upset because someone else got your credit? I have. I can't stand it. Whether it's at home, at work, at church, when I play sports, I don't like it one bit. I remember recently at work, me and a coworker were working on this big project, and it took us 4 hours to complete it. One of my bosses came in, and I wanted to see her what we were doing. She stayed for about 10 minutes, and 7 of those minutes she talked about her family. She leaves, and 15 minutes or so, another big boss comes in, and he asks if the previous boss had been in here helping us. I was like, nah, she was only in it for about 10 minutes. He said, because I was on a call with some other big-time bosses, and she said, I was in there helping Cleve and them. I was ticked. I'm serious. I was not happy. I was not happy at all. And it's happened at church. It's happened at church. I didn't get credit, and I didn't get acknowledgement for something that I did. It was affecting me so much one time that I knew God was tired of hearing me coming to him about it. Because you know it's wrong, but it's still there. Out, being, or working, or whatever it is. Are you doing it for my glory or your own? Are you doing what you do to be acknowledged by others? Humbly. God has the right to do whatever he wants. He may be waiting for a different time, hint, hint, in the story, if at all, to reward us. I mean, if we live the right way, the ultimate reward will be getting a chance to be with him for all of eternity, walking with him, and getting to leave all of this craziness behind. That's the ultimate sign of credit. Colossians 3:23 tells us that whatever we do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And I had to throw in my own little caveat for myself, not even for ourselves. Mordecai's personal feelings about Xerxes are unknown. He made a decision to do what would be right according to his heavenly master. If Xerxes lost his life, it would be in God's hands, not due to the plot and not due to his silence. Think about God's timing and credit in the story of Joseph in Genesis 40. Joseph at one point was in prison, and he deciphered the dreams of two fellow inmates, a baker and a cupbearer. He told the cupbearer that he would be restored to his former position, and the baker that, it's over for you, homeboy. Joseph only asked that the cupbearer would remember him and mention him to Pharaoh. Both of his predictions came true, and of course the cupbearer forgot him. 2 full years go by, and Joseph could be asking, where's my credit for helping somebody out? But he didn't. And when Pharaoh started having dreams that he couldn't decipher, the cupbearer finally remembered Joseph. Joseph deciphered the Pharaoh's dream with the help of God, and Pharaoh named him governor and second in command over all of Egypt. God's timing. I share this to say, do everything that you do for God. I mean everything. And don't just do it for credit. Be like Mordecai, who just decided to do the right thing. Because God sees all that you do, and you never know, he just may give you credit in ways you would have never imagined. Amen? Point number 2, who or what is your Haman? Esther 3 introduces us to a guy named Haman. He was elevated to the highest seat of honor over all the nobles, so much in fact that all of the royal officials at the king's gate had been commanded by King Xerxes to bow before him. And everyone did. Imagine like dominoes falling. Except one, Mordecai. And when word got back to Haman, not only did he want to punish Mordecai, he wanted to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. And that day, if you keep reading and doing your research, you'll see that that day and month shows God's providence in an incredible way. But I don't want to skip ahead. That's your homework. We'll watch the videos later on. But talk about pride. Talk about pride. Because one guy wouldn't bow down to you, you want to wipe all of his people out? This Haman was elevated to the highest seat. What we do know is that he's rich. As we see in chapter 3, verse 9, when he says he would give the king 10,000 talents of silver, which today some would say 100 million, some say it would be over 200 million, somebody said $1 billion. It'd be a bunch of money to put into the king's treasury. Being honest, for some of us, that would be enough for us to bow, right? So we could be in his favor. I mean, rich means right. right? I mean, the more money you have, the sharper you are, the better you are considered in today's society, right? What we also know is that Haman was the son of Hammedatha, who was an Agagite. Agagites are descendants of King Agag, who was ruler of the Amalekites. So Haman could have been an Amalekite. They are believed to be the descendants of Esau. The Amalekites were a group who the Jews had been beefing with from the time they made it to the Promised Land. As a matter of fact, these are the enemies that they fought in Exodus 17. You remember the story when they were battling this group, and when it was Aaron and Hur held up Moses' arms, they were winning. But then when his arms fell down, they were losing. That was this group. Those were Haman's descendants. We see this group again in 1 Samuel 15. God told Saul to wipe them out, everyone and everything. But Saul left King Agag alive, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and the lambs, the good stuff. Later, Samuel took King Agag out himself. The Amalekites are mentioned again in 1 Samuel 30, causing problems for David. And here's Haman, an Amalekite, with Esther and Mordecai almost 550 years later, threatening the extinction of God's people. Some scholars believe that the Amalekites represent the desires of the flesh, the back and forth battle that seems to never go away. One of, if not the greatest day we can ever have, is when we stop playing games and we stop being hypocrites and we get in that water and we say Jesus is Lord and we make him Lord of our lives. But we continue to fight our foe, even out of the waters of baptism, our flesh. Genesis 5:16 through 18 says that our spirit and our sinful nature are in conflict with one another. It ain't always the devil. Sometimes it's our own sinful nature, the desires of the flesh, and we have to take responsibility for the choices that we make. Here are a couple questions for you. Who or what is your Haman? The Amalekite that keeps popping up after many battles. What is the sin or issue that causes problems for you and is a danger to you and possibly others? God told you to totally eliminate it from your life, to wipe it out. But you're holding on to at least a remnant of it, what you think is the good stuff. Is it a relationship that you know is toxic, unhealthy, and dangerous to your spiritual health? But you continue to hold on to it for whatever reason? What desires of the flesh have you, someone that you are not legally married to in the eyes of God? Insular, cliquish, engaging, racist, that is affecting your relationship with God. Hey, look, man, we're going to get tempted until the day he comes back for us. Just like the Amalekites kept coming back. Temptations are going to come. But 1 Corinthians 13 says that no temptation has seized us except what is common to man and woman. But that God is faithful. He will not let us be tempted beyond what we can bear. And when we are tempted, he will provide a way out so that we can stand up under it. Are you looking for that promised way out when you're tempted? Or do you think your situation is special? And you've convinced yourself that you're different. You're just going to do what you're going to do. Family and friends, are you ready to deal with your Haman and totally wipe it out? I pray that we all are. And if you're visiting with us today and you're not really sure how to, please talk to us. We're here to help because we all need it. And that help, and I'm not sounding religious, starts with Jesus. Amen? And my last point, Coincidence or providence? So the edict has come out. The king has gone along with Haman's plot to kill all the Jews. Mordecai is struggling. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, as Carlton talked about, and ashes, and went out into the city wailing and crying bitterly. Esther's peeps hear about this and go and tell her. She sends one of her attendants to find out what's going on with Mordecai. Mordecai tells the attendant, Hathach, what Haman is doing, and even gives him a copy of the edict for their annihilation. And Mordecai tells him, please, have the queen go to the king and beg for mercy for her people. Hathach delivered the message to Esther, and she's a little shook. She's a little shook. She says, hey, if any man or woman goes to the king's presence without being summoned, and he doesn't extend his scepter, they could be killed. And it's been 30 days since she was called to go to the king. Y'all know what I'm talking about. This wasn't a shared responsibility kingdom. The king ruled, and his wife was there for show and to satisfy the needs of the king. Husbands, real quick, let's make sure that we follow the example of Jesus and how he loved the church instead of being like this dude Xerxes as a husband, amen? But Mordecai sent back some profound words to Esther. In verse 12, he says, when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer, do not think that because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. This is deep. This is so deep. But I love how Mordecai says, well, who knows for such a time as this? He didn't say, oh, God told me you should be doing this or that. There's a humility in his words. But he also challenges Esther. Don't think that because you're in the king's house, you're going to escape. Probably thinking if you read chapter 1, he got rid of his queen. And who knows, Esther may have been silent. Relief and deliverance, it's going to come somehow. But they will perish. He believed that maybe she had come to her royal position for such a time as this. Coincidence or God's providence? Mordecai was in a position previously where he saved the life of Xerxes by speaking up. Now it was Esther's turn to use her position and speak up. He pointed out that being in their positions was not luck, good timing, chance, or coincidence. It was God's providence working through their lives. God was purposely behind this. And we can absolutely apply this to our lives. God puts his people in all types of positions sometimes. Joseph ended up second to Pharaoh. Daniel, who had been previously thrown into a den of lions, became ruler over the province of Babylon and chief over all the wise men by Nebuchadnezzar. Esther was made queen. Where has God put you? What influence could you have that could benefit your neighborhoods, the community, your job, your state, country, or different groups of people? We live in a time where we're too focused on our goals or our political beliefs or our stances on issues when it should be about God. Remember that Mordecai and Esther stayed with the Persians rather than going back to their homeland. They made a life for themselves where they were put into positions of influence, and they brought godliness and wisdom into that space. And because of this, people of God and even other foreign nations receive God's blessings and benefits. Could God call on you to be in such a time as this role? Would you refuse because you couldn't be around a certain group of people because they don't look like you, or you disagree with their lifestyle or the choices or what they feel is their purpose? Do you think Mordecai thought what Xerxes was doing with women was a great thing? It's not about us, guys. It's absolutely not about us. It's about God's providence and us being able to bring God's love, kindness, and direction into a space. It's about being in the right place when he calls on us to act and being courageous. And trust me, I'm not saying it's easy. God knows I'm not standing up here telling you that it's easy. And I'm not saying to work in industries where you know Christians should not be working. But we absolutely should not get in the way of how God could use us in great ways. I know we all have examples in our lives of this where it's not till later you see that it wasn't coincidence, but God's providence. I have a couple examples to share. The first is a conversion story. I think of college and how accounting was kicking my butt. It was busting me up. I had dropped it like 2 times. I'm not taking, but I had to take it. And then I was in my last year, last 2 semesters, and I had to get both of these classes. I wasn't dumb. I was on an honors program at Morgan. You know what I mean? But accounting was kicking my butt. I ended up being in the same class with this brilliant, beautiful woman. Oh my, I don't think she ever got a B in her life. All A's. So another girl saw her brilliance and asked, hey, would she be willing to lead a study group for those of us who needed some help? And the girl said yes, and I heard this. Can I join? And so I worked the whole time I was in school. I didn't stay on campus, so I would be in school during the day, go work at night, come up, go back up to the campus to get this training from this young lady. And this brilliant woman helped both of us with this accounting, and I passed. Amen. No. But as we were studying accounting, I had invited her to church. And Shannon and I, who were just dating at the time, we did her first study with her before Shannon fully took over. Then she had to go to Montgomery County that summer for an internship. And I got a call. Cleve, I'm getting baptized. Can you come down and baptize me? So we jumped in a car, flew down to Montgomery County, and I had the honor and privilege of baptizing Denise Rodwell, who many of you know as Denise Powell. I always tell people how she helped me graduate college, and she tells people I helped her find God. My lack of understanding in accounting was not coincidence or bad luck. I was willing to look like a fool and ask for help for God's providence. And here's the thing, and I think we got to get this on straight sometimes. It had nothing to do with me. Someone gets baptized, it's not us, we just planting water. God was going to bring this opportunity of salvation to Denise's door, whether it was me or someone else. I just got a chance to participate and partner with his plan. Amen? Another example is growing up, I never wanted to be around kids, man. Nope. First time I came to church, I walked by, what is that room? Bunch of kids, I'm never going in there. A year later, I got called to teach in children's ministry. And I was not happy. But back then, when you were called to serve, you served because you wanted to be like Jesus, right? No, I'm real. But there was a young man in the class, probably 8 or 9 years old, that changed my life. He helped me find a true love of serving kids, to the point where Shannon and I didn't just teach, we ended up leading children's ministry on multiple occasions. In 26, 27 years, we served in children's ministry. We had him in our wedding, and I don't know if you guys know, it was a young man named Perry Puglisi. He's now 34 years old, got baptized last year, and he's now teaching in the class I originally taught him in all those years ago. I'm not sure if I would have had a love for teaching the kids or would have been able to build a relationship that has lasted over 2 decades if it wasn't for teaching in children's ministry, being in that class at that time with Perry as a student. Coincidence or God's providence? About 3 weeks ago, Shannon and I got to go to Chicago for the first time. We went to this Blue Man show. I got deep dish pizza for the first time, which is the best pizza, not this Uno's crap, the best pizza that God ever put on somebody's heart to build a recipe for. And I don't care, Dale, I've been to New York and I've been to Italy. This is the best. That's a small. That's a small. It took me 3 days to eat that. No vegetables. Vegetables on pizza is an abomination. But we're not going to get into all that. Want vegetables, get a salad. But Shannon surprised me. We went to a I Love the 80s and 90s concert with Rob Bass and the Cover Girls, and Lisa was there. And I got a chance to go take a picture in front of the statue of the true basketball GOAT. Not LeBalco, not LeBron James, not these other people, the true GOAT. Got a chance to go take a picture. But here's the best part. Back when Shannon some years ago was doing chemo, we had an elder come up to anoint Shannon with oil and pray over her, as mentioned in James 5. And Scott got Reuben Marbury, who was in Montgomery County at the time, to come up and do it. It was one of the most spiritual, amazing events in my life. And he and his wife, Barbara, hold a very special place in our hearts because of that. I think about 7 years or so ago, they moved to take over one of the ministries in Chicago. So while we were out there a couple weeks ago, we were like, bet, let's go to service and, see Reuben and Barbara. We looked for that region, but it was deep in the city. And I don't know if you've been to Chicago, but the traffic, you'll get the GPS and it'll say 7 miles, 43 minutes. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. So we didn't want to go too far in. We were closer to the airport. We didn't want to miss our flight. So we went to the closer service. It just happened to be a combined service, and they announced our guest speaker, Reuben Marbury. Shannon and I just looked at each other and smiled. After service, we went to talk to him. It was so great catching up a little bit, and Barbara told Shannon that was the first time they had been at that region, at that service, in the 7 years they had been there. Was that coincidence that we all just happened to be there, or God's providence and just wanting to encourage his kids? And just on Mother's Day weekend, that Friday, I went to this place in East Baltimore called Coco's to get her one of her Mother's Day gifts. She loves their crab cakes. And as I'm walking in the door, another guy's coming out, and we're, yo, what's up? And man, we're hugging, and we're standing in the vestibule, and we're like the doorman, opening the door. This guy, his name is Antonio Freeman. If any of you guys know anything about football, his name is Antonio Freeman. He played for the Green Bay Packers. He's their best receiver of all time to me. He played with Brett Favre. He was Brett Favre's #1 wide receiver. He has a Super Bowl. He scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, and we went to high school together. We played on the same varsity basketball team together. And I had not seen him in 2 decades. He just happened to be in town to take his father out for dinner and then to go to Philly to see his son who plays MLS soccer. And I'm like, man, this is so crazy. I'm preaching this Sunday on coincidence or providence. And he was like, oh, man, that's all God. That's all God. You can't even eat shellfish. You know what I mean? So the fact that we met at a shellfish spot, again, coincidence or providence. How is God's providence working in your life? You need to sit back sometime and really, truly just think about it and stand in awe of this amazing Father who proves over and over and over again how much he loves us. After Mordecai challenged Esther, we see she has a light bulb moment and comes to her senses. In verse 15, it says, Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king. even though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. A man following the instructions of a woman, amen? That's what I'm talking about. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble. Uh-oh. Esther decided to do the right thing by relying on God. Esther said, I need all of you, every single Jew, to fast for me, and I'll do the same. And I'll go to the king, even though it's against the law. She was literally taking her own life in her hands, but she was probably maybe thinking about what Mordecai said. Who knows that you are here for such a time as this? And we have many Esthers, you wonderful queens in this room here today who are amazing and spiritual and beautiful and courageous and strong, who go above and beyond to do the right thing even when you're put in tough situations. And I applaud you. Let me close out. Clement of Rome presented Esther as a model of piety and courage, and a popular example of such virtues as wisdom, courage, and female agency in the writings of both men and women. The story of Esther is one of her willingness to step up to the plate to save her people. But for such a time as this is not locked into ancient Israel's past. Rather, it arches into the future as Jesus too faced such a time as this, when he said, my hour has come. That hour meant that Jesus died brutally and unfairly so that we might have life. He was crucified and rose from the dead so that we might rise to new life in him for eternity. Thank you all for this honor of getting a chance to share. I love coming to Delaware. I hope you guys got even just a little mustard seed of something that would encourage you. And to God be the glory.